Thank you for bearing with us through technical issues. We're going to call the Special Personnel Administrative Affairs Committee to order. It is July 18th, 2022, and we are in the Aldermanic Chamber. The time is 8:10 p.m. We also have Zoom teleconference availability. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. We're going to start out with a roll call. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderman Tyler Govea.
Here.
Alderman Thomas Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Tebow is here. Also in attendance, we have Alderman O'Brien, Alderman at Large O'Brien, President and Alderman at Large Lori Wilshire. We have Man at Large Tricia Klee.
I'm large.
No, you are now. I just promoted you. Ward 3, Alderman Patricia Klee. Alderman at Large Melbourne Moran Jr. Alderman Ernie Jetty. Alderwoman Gloria Timmons. There's a lot of people here tonight. Alderman Rick Dowd. We also have the mayor in attendance, Attorney Steve Bolton, and Dan Healy, who is applying for the position of clerk.
Thank you. We have a full house tonight. We're going to start with public comment. Is there anyone in the chamber that would like to speak? And I'm looking quickly online. Is there anyone online who would like to give public comment? Okay, seeing no one, we're going to move on to interviews.
So Office of City Clerk, we have Daniel R. Healy, with term to expire indefinitely.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you like to introduce your selection, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And of course, I'm going to introduce my nominee, Dan Healy. But before that, I wanted to again say that it has been for the last many decades, several decades, great to know Sue Lovering, who I had the honor of appointing as city clerk several years ago, and I think she has followed in, very in the footsteps of other city clerks that we've had that have done a very good job, and she worked very hard on this the 2020 election with all of the absentee voting. And despite the many, many challenges concerning that, the election went very smoothly, and it was just because of her long hours and dedication. But beyond that, she's just a wonderful person. She used to work for the Board of Aldermen. I have had the honor of appointing two city clerks, Eleanor Benson, who was another fantastic person and served, a dozen years maybe, Sue Lovering, and now I'm here to nominate Dan Healy, who is a very qualified nominee. Mr. Healy is town clerk at the town of Dover. Town clerk at the town of Derry, 2 Ds, but yes, Derry. Which is a town of about 30,000 people. He has been in that office for 6 years, and of course has learned the elections from start to finish. But has also been very active in the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association, educating himself there. He is now second vice president of that association, which means that he's in the queue to move up to vice president and president. He is the legislative committee co-chair of the same organization, City and Town Clerks Association. They review all the bills before the legislature, make recommendations to the executive committee of the Clerks Association, and then based upon the decisions of the executive committee, the chair of Mr. Healy, has testified before the legislature on various issues concerning elections and other concerns of city and town clerks. He is also vice chair of the certification committee of the Clerks Association, meaning that committee oversees the education or the certification of clerks across New Hampshire, set up the courses, the curriculum, and run the yearly, annual, one-week courses that are given for town clerks and city clerks. So I think you can gather from all of that that he's very well qualified for this job, and will not need a lot of on-the-job training, and will certainly serve, I believe, the city of Nashua very well. And with that, I will give you Mr. Healy and ask him to tell you a little bit about himself and why he's interested in working for Nashua City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Donchis. You pretty much covered everything there, but I've been town clerk of Derry for 6 years. I was first elected in 2016 for a 3-year term. I've run 2 additional times, been elected twice more, so I'm currently serving in my 3rd term. The year that I started, I signed up for certification that August. It's a 3-year program, 1 week a year. So I obtained my New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association certification in 2019, which was the earliest that I could obtain that. I've since gone on and obtained International Institute of Municipal Clerk Association certification. I received that in March of this year. So that's for international certified. Currently, like the mayor stated, I am 2nd Vice President of the New Hampshire City and Town Clerks Association. I was voted by my peers on a ballot at our last conference to that position. So I'm hoping to move up in October of this year to Vice President, and then the following year, President of that association. I've done many elections in Derry. I first came on, my very first election was actually the primary in 2016, followed by the general election in 2016. So when I started, I was thrown right into elections. I've done many since then. In 2020, obviously a very different time, very difficult. Our office was open for voters to come in. We had lines out the door every day for absentee ballots. We processed around 6,500 absentee ballots in Derry with a staff of myself and then 2 part-time employees. We did have occasional help from other employees in the building, but we managed to get all those ballots out and not a single issue in that election. We had the largest polling place in the state, being 1 polling place. We used our high school. We had about 12 or 13,000 voters through on that day, and the additional 6,500 absentee ballots, around 19,000 voters that we processed with no issues. I know we've been issuing vital records, marriage licenses. I know all that stuff, the dog licensing. I'm very familiar with all the processes, the right to know law. We get quite a few right to knows, being a larger community. Very familiar with that process, what's public, what's not public, and in getting back to the resident or the requester in a timely manner on those issues. So be open to any questions if you do have them.
Thank you for that. We'll open it up to questions. I'm going to go with committee members first, and then I'll call on you to keep your hand up, just so you guys know. Opus.
I always feel like it's rude to just leave it out there. So, Mr. Healy, as a currently elected city clerk, or town clerk, I guess, in Derry, is there any kind of conflict of interest? Do you have to step down? Can you just do both roles concurrently if appointed here?
So if appointed here, I would be resigning in Derry. That would be a conflict. There's too many, I mean, they're both full-time positions, being the main thing, and there's too many dates that would be conflicts. The primary and the general election would fall on the same date. It would be impossible to do both positions.
Just as a follow-up, I noticed you went to high school at Pinkerton. So Derry seems like it's very close to you, so I want to appreciate you putting yourself forward for this because Nashua's another great community, and we would be lucky to have you based on the qualifications that I see.
Thank you. So being a town clerk, you have to live in the community that which you serve. So being the Derry clerk, I had to reside in Derry. But being the city clerk, being an appointed position, I could remain in Derry.
Right, I didn't expect you to move. I was
Oh.
just saying, thank you for
I
serving
mean, you
our
can.
community as well as
It's a
yours.
great city. Are you all set, Alderman Lopez?
Yes, thank you.
I was just wondering who's on. Let's go to Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So my question, you already took my right to know question away, so I'm not going to ask that. But can you tell me about a time that you had a really tough citizen come in and how you dealt with it, if that happened?
Yeah, it's rare. The main thing is we do follow all the laws. So we have residents question, why am I being fined this civil forfeiture for my dog? Well, it's an RSA. So usually if you know the laws to back it up, it makes the situation a little bit easier because they're questioning why they're getting this fine, or they're questioning why they can't have access to this record. But if you have the law, that's typically what I've guided them towards. And usually with difficult customers or residents, after a little while of explaining, the majority seem to understand, although they might not be happy with the result, they at least understand the process. There's a few occasions where they've just come in basically to argue, and if they're not getting their way, they're not going to be happy. So in that situation, if it's going around for too much back and forth, it's basically, well, this is the law that we have to follow, so that there's not much more that we can do for you.
Follow up? Thank
Alderman
you.
Tebow.
Have you ever had to call the police on someone?
I have not. So the closest to that would be at a polling location where someone was not following the rules of that polling location. And we had an officer already stationed inside, so just going out and discussing with that person, having the police officer discuss. But I haven't had to call an officer to the town hall.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Tebow?
Yep.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. I thank you for your candidacy and for wanting to be the clerk in Nashua. Elections are very near and dear to my heart because I believe they're the foundation of our democracy. And so my question to you is, I guess I have two questions. One is regarding election security and the safeguarding of both the polling place and ballots, and I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
So the way that that I run the elections in Derry currently is we receive our ballots from the Secretary of State's office for a state federal election. We open up the ballots, we verify that they're the correct ballots for our town. We inventory them, so we count them into stacks of 100, reseal them with the resealing label. 2 people sign that, typically myself and the deputy clerk. Then they're locked in the vault until election day. So no one's going in there and touching those ballots until election day. There's actually a camera in the vault. I imagine something similar here. In the morning, I arrive at the town hall with our DPW, and we bring the ballots out front. We have town councilors in Derry. 2 town councilors, one from each party, will show up and watch those ballots be loaded into the truck. And they will actually ride with DPW to the polling place, bring them in, and have them for use during the day. They're behind the clerk's table, and the clerk is the only one that brings them to the ballot clerks during the day. At night, when they're put, throughout the day, when the ballot counting machine box fills up, the cardboard boxes that the ballots came in are loaded back up. They have the red tape put on them, the security tape, all the signatures required. and they're stored at the polling place until it closes for the night. And then we had a police escort. We used the police van to bring them back to the town hall. And I watched them go into the vault at our town hall. And when they get to the vault, I signed that I received all of them. And it's back under the camera. After the recount period expires, they're moved in the town hall down into the basement into another secure vault. So we take the ballot security very seriously.
All set, Alderman Clemmons? Follow-up?
Yeah, just to follow up, thank you for that, I appreciate that. I know in Nashua, you know, it's probably that times 9 because we have 9 polling places. And, you know, I'm just happy to know that, you know, we take it seriously too. We have police details at all 9 polls. It's an expensive process, right? It's an expensive process
Yes.
to safeguard democracy, and I'm just glad that you feel the same way. My second question is more, I guess you could call it a state issue, if you will, but seeing as how the position you hold, what's your thoughts on paper ballots?
So, what do you mean by paper ballots? Not going digital with?
Correct.
I like a paper ballot backup. I don't want the process to, my opinion is I don't want the process to be all on a computer. Last week I actually attended a meeting in Concord where they had 2 new ballot counting machines out for display, and you know, kind of a test run. And one of them was, you know, the ballots all created on the machine. And in the feeling among town clerks, at least the ones that I've talked to, I've gathered, is that we'd prefer the paper physical ballot, and it's a good backup.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you. I agree with you 100% on that. You've satisfied my 2 biggest concerns, and I'll thank you again for bringing your candidacy forward. I certainly will support you.
Thank you.
Great. All set?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Gavea?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your candidacy, and I'm happy to hear how serious you take election integrity, a lot like Alderman Clemmons. It is an issue I like to check up on, but one of along the same lines of elections, going from 1 polling location to 9 polling locations around the city of Nashua, obviously a bigger challenge in a bigger city. Is that something you're ready for?
Yes, I'm actually glad you asked that when he mentioned, that Alderman Clemmons mentioned the 9 polling places. When I started in Derry, we had 3 polling places. So we found out that we could work with 1, and we prefer that just because it's easier to manage the 1. But I have managed 3. It's a little bit more of a challenge getting all the staffing and those logistics, but we've had to separate out, okay, so this is going to this polling place, this is going to this polling place. So I have had some experience with that in the past. I believe the first year we started with just the 1 polling place was actually 2020, because we found one that was large enough that it could accommodate everyone and be spaced out. But I don't think 9 will be a problem, because I do have some experience with multiple polling locations.
All set, or do you have a follow-up?
I just have a follow-up, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. And then just the second question I had was, what makes you want to make the jump to become the city clerk of Nashua?
I think I'm ready for a new challenge. I've been in Derry for 6 years. I know the city runs a little bit differently, but I just kind of am looking for a new opportunity. And my staff currently in Derry is great, and they're going to do a great job if I move on. But I've been there 6 years, over 6 years. And I think it's in a good spot now, but I think I'm ready for kind of something new.
All set, Alderman Fay? Okay. If you don't mind, I have a question.
go ahead.
And then I'll give
Go
you a
ahead.
second. Okay, thank you. So my question is, obviously, you're very qualified, you've worked in dairy. I think that the last few years especially have been especially trying for people. During COVID, it was really incumbent upon city and town clerks to make sure people knew exactly how to vote and where to vote and how those things has changed. So I'm wondering how you guys handled it in dairy. And, you know, if something were that, hopefully we don't have another global pandemic happen, but like how you would handle it here.
We did a lot of outreach. I had a town clerk Facebook page. Our town moderator had a Facebook page. We did a lot of posting. We constantly updated our website, which sent out emails to all our subscribers. We ordered signs to put around town, tell people where they're voting since it changed. We tried to just do a lot of outreach to residents, just to make sure that they knew where they voted, how they could vote, if they wanted to vote by absentee, if they wanted to vote in person, what the process was. So the biggest thing was outreach and making sure that the residents knew what options were available to them. And our office, I mean, emails, phone calls, we were getting them nonstop during the 2020 election. And, you know, we were working, since we had such a small staff, I was probably working double the time just to make sure that the election did run smooth. But I think outreach to the residents was the biggest thing.
Well, thank you. I'll hold my next question. Alderman Tebow?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So Nashua certainly is a challenge. There's no doubt about that. I've been working at the polls when we've had a lot of chaos going on, and nine wards can be tough to get to. But you know, the question I have, and this is not on Sue at all, but I think once COVID started, we had a lack of really training the poll workers better, as far as the moderators, the assistant the ward clerks, I guess, selectmen. And we did a lot more Zoom training and even like, here's a PowerPoint, read it. Is that something, did you do training yourself to the staff at the elections or at the polling places? And is that something you would do here as well?
So initially, when I first started, I did do the training for the first few years. Our town moderator took that over within the last few years. But being a legislative committee co-chair, I'm up in Concord often, or I was up in Concord often following the election bills. So I know the changes that are coming. There's even if you were trained for 2020, there's been some changes just based off this last session. So I'm comfortable doing the training. I haven't done the training myself in probably a few years. Like an actual training, I have trained some poll workers on some things at the polls throughout the day, but the actual training I haven't done in a few years, but I'm comfortable doing it. I follow all the election laws and the changes constantly, so.
Thank you.
Alderman Tebow?
So here we have 9 moderators, right? It's one for each ward, so it's not just one. So it's, I think that's more challenging, and they change a lot. You know, every election, you know, we lose some, we gain some. We actually have one out in the audience today, Tim from Ward 7. So I guess, how do we make sure all our polling places are on the same page? Because, you know, I see what we did in our ward, and another ward might do something different. Maybe it's a smaller venue for the election. Maybe it's a bigger place. Trying to get everybody on the same page and making sure that the integrity is there. I'll tell you, there's not a cop or a policeman that brings, that follows our people back to City Hall after we're done. There's just not. Sometimes there's one at the end of the night. Sometimes there's not, depending on the size of the election. So you don't always have that same going through each of the polls. How do you make sure it's consistent between each one? Because you want Nashua to run as it's one, even though it's 9 separate ones.
Yeah, that's the goal. I think the biggest thing would be to train the moderators and the ward clerks first, and then kind of run the training with all the additional poll workers after. But I wouldn't want one polling location, even a minor thing, running different than another one. Especially, say, if a resident sees that, if they're at one polling location and something different's going on at another location, To me, that's not good. So I would want them all to be run the same, get the same reports from all of them. But I think the biggest thing first would be training the people that run the individual locations on what the procedures are, and then any additional poll workers for that day after that.
Thank you.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. First of all, Mayor, I'd like to thank you for bringing forward such a great candidate. I think Mr. Healy has kind of the right mix of education, experience, professional certifications, and probably a little bit of thick skin. I mean, that you kind of have to have that to go along with the job as well. So I appreciate that too. I don't really have any questions. I've been listening to all the questions you've answered. I appreciate all your answers. I think they were very good, and you'll be getting my support from this country, of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Moran, and then Alderman Clayton.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for coming in. I just have one question, and kind of like the climate of elections in this country. Do you believe in fair and free elections?
I do, yes.
Great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Alderman Clayton, Alderman Jettie.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Healy, thank you for being willing to come to the city of Nashua. It's my favorite city. But putting that aside, one of the things that I've noticed as a candidate who's run for the state as well as for the city is and I think the alderman to my right here used the proper word, the climate. The climate is becoming more and more hostile. And I can tell you over the last couple of elections, both municipal and state, US, however you want to look at it, the anger and even the treatment of candidates that are holding signs, treatment of each other, things being yelled at each other. I can tell you that I had to call the clerk's office and even our moderator and so on because of some of the behavior. How do you handle that? And I mean, it got nasty to the point of even being spit on by people and candidates telling people, if you're a Democrat, you go down the street to vote. It got pretty bad. So how would you handle situations like that?
So if they're candidates and they're saying something that they shouldn't, I mean, they can be reported to the Secretary of State's office, Attorney General, and then they would look into that. The biggest thing that I've been telling my residents that might have some concerns over the elections or, they just don't feel good about them is to come work an election. That's the best thing that I've come up with, is if they don't trust our process and that's what they're angry about, then come actually work the election. And, if you want to be a ballot clerk, or if you want to be a greeter, or if you want to count at the end of the night the write-ins, and you can see that, everything there is legitimate. The machine, printed out the results. These people, they sat together and they counted the hand counts, the write-ins. If it's a situation where someone's being spit on, I mean, I think that's a point where a police officer would get involved. I've gone out and I've talked with candidates that are getting slightly unruly, and they're usually fine after a little bit. But a situation like that, I mean, a candidate or someone holding a sign shouldn't be spit on. So that would be a situation for a police officer. But just in terms of, if they're not confident in elections, come work and see.
Thank you. Great answer.
Yeah. Alderman Jettie, I had you next. And then
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Elections are important, but there's only one or two a year. Most of your time, your office is dealing with a lot of things. Most of our citizens, their contact with City Hall is pretty much largely the city clerk's office. And I'd be interested in what your philosophy is. I hope this is a softball question for you, but what your philosophy is about, dealing with the public. I know oftentimes you hold, important records, death certificates, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and oftentimes people are under time constraints. They have deadlines to meet, and they may be doing something they should have done a week ago, but here it is, the last minute. They're under a lot of pressure. How do you view your role in yourself dealing with the public, but in managing a large staff that deals with the public?
Well, in most towns and cities, I know the city clerk's office, town clerk's office is the first contact. So our office now fields a lot of calls where people are calling us just because they don't know who else to call in the building. So a lot of it's just the redirecting. But as far as getting things that they need, we don't have many pending, I'd say, requests out there. So if someone needs a certificate or, that's a pretty quick process with us. So we try to accommodate, I guess, any resident or someone that needs something to the best that we can. And if we can't, we then direct them to where they can get the help that they need.
Thank
All
you.
set, Alderman Jettie?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Dowd?
Yes, I think you've got great qualifications and do a great job, so you have my support. I don't know what the mayor's plan is for you to visit the 9 polling locations, but they're all schools. And I work every day with the plant supervisor of school maintenance, and if you want to visit the schools during the summer before they're full of noisy kids, he has the keys and we can visit the schools, but it's up to between you and the mayor. If you want to do that, I'll offer that up.
I mean, I'd be interested in seeing the different locations of the polling place and how they're, what they look like inside. We do have the state primary coming up in September, so it'd be good to see the area that they're all in, and kind of like what the gym, I'm assuming most of them are the gym, what the setup kind of is.
Madam Chair, so our plan here is assuming that Mr. Healy is confirmed on the 25th, he would start work on the 27th. So there would be time for him to acclimate to the polling places, and I'm sure we could arrange, I think the idea of him visiting is a good one, just to get familiar with things.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Other questions from committee, Alderman? Everybody feels good? Okay. That concludes our interview. We will move on to appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend confirmation of the new appointment of Daniel R. Healy as city clerk with an indefinite term.
For the motion, is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Excellent.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you.
For answering all our questions. All right, that concludes our portion. Is there anyone for the public who would like to speak? We have a second
There's nobody on unless Tim
public.
wants
I
to
don't
speak.
see. Tim, do you want to speak? Okay. There's only one person.
No moderator stories?
All right, general discussion. Remarks by Alderman? Do I have a motion? Alderman Lopez.
Move to adjourn.
The motion is to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you, everyone.